Okay, so our next presenter is taking on the theme of Artful Counterstories by Black and Brown Utes. Remember that movie, Utes? Okay, we have Elena Schmidt from the city of Asheville and Western Carolina University up in Asheville, and she's created a great visual arts project by and for Black and Brown youth in Asheville. She's going to tell us all about it, and would you please come forward and hold it before you get going, because sometimes people forget. We have Elena came all the way down from Asheville to share this awesome piece. I want to hear some love, please. Thank you.
All right, thanks y'all. My name is Elena. I use she, her pronouns. I am an environmental educator turned social justice advocate, and I see both of those things as being deeply interconnected. I'm a Children in Nature Network natural leader, and I just graduated last Friday with my master's in experiential and outdoor education. Yay! I did it! This presentation emerges from my thesis research titled Anti-Oppression, Self-Expression, an Artographic Understanding of Black and Brown Youth's Conceptualizations of Nature. If that's a long title, the manuscript is over 200 pages. So I work and play in the city of Asheville, North Carolina, built on the traditional, ancestral, and present-day stolen and unceded lands of the Cherokee. Asheville is a city known for its craft beer, local art scene, and for its proximity to world-class outdoor recreation areas. And Asheville, like all cities in the United States, also has a complicated racial history. It was built on the exploited labor of enslaved Africans who, once emancipated, were then excluded from owning highly valued land reserved for whites, and later displaced from their neighborhoods and businesses through urban renewal. Asheville is also among the first cities in the U.S. to commit to a process of reparations for harms done to the Black communities living there. I want you to grab a pen or pencil and whatever paper you have available. The back of your notes, your schedule, a napkin. Don't use the tablecloth. I don't think the hotel staff would appreciate that. Let me just show me a thumbs up when you're ready. Awesome. So, nature. What does this word evoke in you? I invite you to close your eyes and imagine yourself spending time with nature. Spend a moment allowing yourself to fully experience the sights, sounds, smells, textures, and tastes of being with nature. Take about 30 seconds and draw or write your ideas of nature on your paper. Where are you? What physical features are present? What are you doing? Who else is there? How do you feel? Now think about who you are. Think of your past experiences related to nature. Think of your preferences. What do you consider not nature? One might imagine nature as a place filled with lush green plants, but then is the surface of the sea not nature? Is nature a place? Do you think of a bird? Is the nest a bird builds considered nature? What about the nests that humans build out of steel, concrete, and asphalt? Is nature an object? Then what about emotion, spirituality, art? If you find yourself drawing lines around some of these, why? My research sits at the intersection of nature, cities, children, racial justice, and art. I used art in my research as a way of creating and gathering knowledge about nature in Asheville, North Carolina. In doing so, I hope to support increasing racially equitable access to nature for children living in our city. This was inspired by the Children in Nature Network's Cities Connecting Children to Nature initiative. But as I thought about ways that I might measure access to nature or strategies to increase access, I began to wonder, what does nature even mean? Whose definitions of nature am I centering in my work to increase that access? Some ideas of nature include excursions out of urban environments into more natural areas to escape a civilization and technology, such as the wilderness. And often found in the excursions that people will seek in federal and state parks, protected forests, and scenic waterways, like the ones you can find surrounding Asheville. Ideas of nature as wild, as separate from humans, are overwhelmingly white-centered definitions. And the overemphasis of white cultural preferences as being the only way or the correct way to conceptualize and relate with nature is a product of white supremacy. For this reason, I use nature with strike-through to indicate placing the concept of nature under erasure, meaning that current understandings of the word fall short, that there are power structures creating these understandings. My research aimed to interrogate these structures and meanings by asking Black and brown youth living in Asheville to share their artful counterstories about nature in our city. Asheville is known for its proximity to nature and for its cultural art. Doing art and experiencing art sends reverberations into our souls. Art is a way of processing, expressing, and communicating our experiences. Art can move our emotions and sometimes move us into action. In my research, I used art as a methodology and a method to highlight the meanings and relationships Black and brown children have with nature in our city, to both challenge and inspire people in positions with the power to influence access to nature to consider that what is often seen as normal and desirable ways of conceptualizing and being a part of nature may or may not resonate for everyone. That each of our own ideas of nature and our preferences in relating with nature are influenced by our social identities. Using art in this research is significant in another way. I applied Black feminist theory as the theoretical underpinnings of this research. Art in its various forms has been a powerful, accessible, and necessary method of producing and practicing and sharing Black feminist theory and other social justice projects. So in keeping with the artful nature of my study, I represent the findings of my literature review in the form of a poem. I'll read each verse and then share what it means to me. This reflects the process of creating art and sharing meaning about art, which I asked youth to do in this research project. Touching earth, breathing wind, water flows in veins through landscapes of each body. Humans are a part of nature, and we are intimately connected to it. We need nature to live happy, healthy, successful, and community-oriented lives. Towers sprout, pavement creeps, wheeled boxes rocket down the street. In the hustle, youth don't meet the dandelion at their feet. The world is swiftly urbanizing, and this process generally has not been thoughtful about maintaining human-nature connections, especially for youth. Redlining homes, white tracing humans. A wall bars connection to abundance and each other. Informed by critical race theory, my study examines the relationships of race, racism, and power, and it contains an activist dimension. I reference the historic racist policy of redlining neighborhoods in Asheville, which contributes to racially inequitable access to nature. Paralleling this, I use the metaphor of white chalk outlines to represent the violent ways white people have historically protected spaces that have historically been explicitly or implicitly reserved for white people. Painting futures, singing sobs, weaving threads of resistance round monumental sins time cannot transcend. My approach to this study is also deeply informed by Black feminist theory, specifically the writings of Patricia Hill Collins, Audre Lorde, Brittany Cooper, and Nikki Kendall. The artful approach of this study reflects the creative methods many Black feminist thinkers have used to create and represent their knowledge claims in resistance to white patriarchal institutions which have historically controlled knowledge claims. This verse also references the Vance Monument in Asheville's Pack Square, which the city removed as one step towards racial equity. Counting dimes, not making sense, of distance, cost, and relevance, to safely go far from one's home, 4 green areas to roam. Disparities in the representation of people of color in nature are produced by a number of barriers in access, including real and perceived racial discrimination, normalization of white cultural preferences and clashing cultural biases, limited socioeconomic resources, and real and perceived safety in outdoor spaces. Sharing meals, laughter spills, still persevere, connections will. Souls caress earth through Jordans just as well. Despite the lack of representation in the outdoors, people of color do, in fact, seek out, use, and enjoy nature on their own terms in ways that may not necessarily assimilate into white cultural norms. Rather than having some deficiency in connectedness to nature, what is actually lacking is white people making room for the presence of counter-narratives which honor how Black and brown people might prefer to conceptualize, access, and experience nature in ways that can be different from dominant white preferences. Life is cycling, fruits are ripening. Snow pea toes press soil, insown seeds of hope. Youth can be powerful leaders driving initiatives to connect children to nature. Because I was interested in racially equitable access to nature for children living in the city of Asheville, my study centered the perspectives of Black and brown youth residents in our city. To disrupt white-centered assumptions around what nature is and how to do nature, I asked a group of 6 Black and brown youth, ages 8 to 12, living in Asheville, North Carolina, to create art around their ideas of nature in our city. This study took place through a series of program sessions conducted through the Southside Community Garden and Asheville Writers in the Schools and Community, a Black-led nonprofit supporting the development of young Black and brown artists in Asheville. For a little context, Asheville Writers in the Schools and Community finds its home in the Arthur R. Eddington Education and Career Center, the same building which originally held the African American Livingston Street School in Asheville's historically Black and rapidly gentrifying Southside neighborhood. Next to the center is the Southside Community Garden, located on the site of the former school's playground. This is the methodology I used for any researchers in the audience. Rather than extracting meaning from the art that youth created and reducing it down to bite-sized codes, using the methodology of artography allowed me to crystallize understanding, to honor the multiple dimensions of meaning, the various perspectives that emerge in the research, and the interpretations that readers will create for themselves when experiencing the art that youth created. And now my friend Marlo in the back is going to click this link. We represented the artful data from this study in the form of a publicly distributed art zine, which credits the youth artists for their knowledge and counterstories about nature and invites viewers to consider how our social identities can shape our ideas of nature. Youth's art is represented in this way for the viewer to analyze for themselves and interpret meanings from, rather than me as the researcher doing that for you, as you might expect from more traditional research. I chose to do this to resist my problematically giving voice to the youth participants, and instead make room for them to speak for themselves. As we spend some time experiencing youth's artful counterstories about nature, I challenge us to consider how our social identities influence the ways we each conceptualize what nature is and how we create relationship with it. How are we doing with the link, Marlo? I do have a backup if it doesn't work. I have printed ones, which you can take home anyway. I feel like I should start singing to fill the silence. Is it up? Okay, if we can click on that link, it should take us to the art zine. If it doesn't work, give me a hand signal and I'll move on. Yay, that's it. Woohoo, yay Marlo, woo! Thank you. So I am going to ask Marlo to slowly click through. If you can expand in the bottom right-hand corner to make it a little bigger. And we're just gonna take a few moments to enjoy and immerse ourselves in this art zine that I worked with the youth to create around their ideas of nature in the city of Asheville, North Carolina. If it's hard to read on the screen, I apologize. I do have some printed copies which I can share with you when we're done. They did not hold back. All right, I think we need to quickly move through the last couple of pages. It says 4.5 minutes on my timer. Is that wrong? Okay, I'm sorry. All right, we can wrap up real quick. Marlo, if you're able to take me back to the slides, that would be wonderful. Asheville writers in the schools and community and the youth in this study gifted me with their time, resources, and knowledge to make this study happen. It was important to me to foster meaningful relationships in and through this work and to credit youth artists for their knowledge contributions by including their names with permission next to their art. Another way that I'm trying to reciprocate value and avoid traditional extractive forms of research is by opening a way for viewers of this work to donate, if so inclined, to the awesome youth development and nature programming happening at Asheville Writers in the Schools and Community and the Southside Community Garden. There's a QR code on the back of the art zine, which you can contribute to their programming if you're interested. In addition to the printed art zines, I'll leave you with this. By recognizing nature as a social construct and making each of our own assumptions about nature conscious, we can create room to learn about and embrace more meanings and ways of relating with nature, ultimately strengthening the Children in Nature movement. Because Black and brown folks have always been and continue to be deeply connected to Earth and global leaders in the outdoors and for liberation, despite what dominant racist narratives would have us believe. Thank you. Sorry.